Write down 50 things, 50 strengths about you. 50. If you can, write 100 and read them out loud because that's who you are. Don't focus on, oh, I don't have a degree and whatever. Don't focus on, oh, my parents always wanted me to be. Who cares? You have your own life and you have to cherish that. Not everyone has the opportunity to be here today. Not everyone.
Welcome to After Peter Pan. I'm your host, Pat Teneriello. Hope you're enjoying your summer. We're back after a short hiatus to speak with psychotherapist Fabienne Galhidi. She has decades of experience working with youth, trauma survivors, and people rebuilding their lives. She shares her powerful story from lost soul working in the nightlife scene to finding her path through therapy and service. We talk about the victim mindset, building resilience, gratitude, what it really means to take ownership of your life. She shares a lot of practical tools for emotional regulation, self-care, with small daily actions that could have a big impact. This episode is really about becoming the person that you needed when you were young. Enjoy. So maybe we can start by you taking us back to your younger years. What was life like for you growing up?
I am coming from immigrants' parents, so there was a lot of pressure from, I would say, from my father, coming from a very, very strict background and being in the wars back in the days. When they came here, it was for a better life. So, the American dream, it was a Canadian dream to come here and be filthy rich, right? It didn't happen that way, but that was the dream. So I grew up in a family where my dad was very, very strict. And so, yeah, they divorced after a while. And I would say that's about when my life started to be a little bit rocky then. So I've experienced unfortunate situation that brought me into a mode where I became like the black sheep of the family, let's just say. So very young, at a young age, starting at 4 years old, I had to be resilient and courageous. So that's where it all comes from.
And when you say black sheep of the family, like what do you mean by that?
Very hard for me to be in a little box being told what to do. And having parents being very strict. At some point, I kind of started to be rebellious. So my parents were divorced. So I ended up, there was a point where I lived with my dad, and that at some point I decided to AWOL because my dad was very, very strict. I couldn't do anything. I was 14 years old. And then it started, way younger when it started to, hide from my parents that I was going out. So I would go in and sleep at a friend's house. And then, the drinking, like what some, I wouldn't say most teenagers, but the ones that I want to try things. So I was always the one who would be more like not listening to my parents and doing the opposite that they would ask me. It was my way to be a rebel and say, no, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to do whatever I want. That's when I left school. I went to Cégep, wasn't working for me. And then I started working in the bar scene. So yeah, for 11 years working in the bar scene. So from, working in those not so wonderful bars to working in upscale 5-star restaurant and at the parliament. So I've done it all, and it kind of fascinated, like shaped me into who I am today. Everyone has every experience we have, every traumas we have comes from the result of who I am today.
And when you said you went AWOL, does that mean you actually left home, or like were you young when
I
you left
did.
home?
It was 24 hours, but it was enough for my father to find me. And let's just say it was my last time I was at my dad's. I remember he picked me up and I was like, why did you find me? Because he was very strict and didn't leave me much space. He had other children and I would have to take care of them. And it was a rough patch for me as a 12-year-old back in the day. So when I was 14, I decided that I was going to go out, went with all my friends, and I just decided never to come home. But he was worried, and when he found me, European man, strict, so he gave me the and then he called my mom and he said, I'm sending your daughter back to you. And that was it for me after that. Like, I kept a relationship with him, but it was never a strong
I see.
father-daughter
Right.
relation.
Your parents were already split up by then.
Oh yeah, I was 4 when they split up. That's why I say it all started, my traumas started from when my parents divorced. There was after that some sexual abuse when I was very young, and then not being able to get through this and putting it under the carpet and becoming, I think that's why I became much of a rebel at some point. So after having this nightlife, clubbing, attention that you get from working in the bar scene, alcohol, drugs, everything, you name it, right? I remember at some point I was getting old. I was like 27, I think. And I remember that night where I'm looking at everyone in the club and I'm like behind the bar, I'm like, what the am I doing here? I said, I don't want this anymore. That's it. I'm done. I remember it was like so strong. It was like I could almost like dissociated and looking at myself from up there and saying like, nah, that's not for you, man, anymore. It's time for you to do something else. And I went back to school, and today I am who I am because of all of this, right? But it was a rough patch. I have told you before, like I was a lost soul for so many years, so many years. And the reason being not being able to tell the truth about what happened to me, tell the truth of who I am now, and accepting, and being in this victimization life and mindset. 27 years, like from 4 years old, this happened to me, blah, 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 blah. And there's like events after events where, we all go through traumas or situations that can be traumatic. And for me at that time, I was just in a victimization mindset, poor me, this happened and that. But at the end of the day, if you don't take actions towards healing, towards forgiving, towards letting go things that you can't control, you're always going to be in that spiral of victimization.
Yes, that's interesting. How would you describe this victimization mindset? Because I'm thinking of myself. I went through childhood trauma as well. And for me, it was almost like it never happened for like 20 years. It's like I blacked it out. It's like it didn't want to go there. And it's like it wasn't even in my subconscious. I just, and then it took a moment with my sister where she brought up her trauma, and then all of a sudden it was like a switch went off. I'm like, that happened to me too. I had totally forgotten. When you talk about victimization mindset, how does that factor in? Like, what was your experience like?
There was time where you want to put it under the carpet, like it didn't happen. Or I remember for me, because I was 4 years old when the abuse happened, and I told my mom, and at that time, she didn't know what to do. So I remember we just never went back to these people who were taking care of us. But my sister wasn't able to talk about it. She was a little bit older. I said it. And then we never went back. It changed someone's life. It changed my childhood. It changes everything. And that's when, I think I put it under the carpet, but there was the behaviors that were not, that were saying, crying for help, crying for healing, crying for, someone to understand what I was trying to say. And it's not easy when like you don't really know, like you kind of said it, like for you put it under the rug and it never happened until someone said, because you blocked it, because sometimes it's too painful. So it was a little bit like that for me
Mm-hmm.
at some point. Couldn't remember my childhood besides some major events that were not wonderful. And I would say that at some point, my sister and I talked about it. And I remember asking her, like, can we talk about this? And she said, for her, she wasn't there anymore. She said to me, I don't want to talk about this. I'm married now. I have my life. And I'm like, okay. So it was just like to each his own healing journey, right? At that point, she had done the work that she had, and she just didn't want to go there. And for me, it was like, wait a minute, can I talk about? So what happened then is I went to do some personal growth. I remember there was a friend of mine who said, hey Fab, like you should start maybe think about doing something for yourself and it's a weekend. And I said, I don't know. But to retract to your question too, was always in the poor me, some, I wouldn't say depression, but a state of mind that was negative, not really knowing I was negative. It was a good friend of mine, Brenda, who said, sometimes, like, it's heavy, you're heavy. I was like, what? I'm heavy? What you mean, But then after taking a step back and her having letting me know, like, that I was negative, it kind of like hit me like, wow, like, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be negative. I don't want to be heavy on my friends because I'm like, poor me, poor me. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. It was like, it was heavy. So I went to this weekend, and that's when it started for me. Starting doing some group therapy to, I don't know, in English, we call, en français, désancrer. So when you have, like, your parents, my dad told me, oh, you're only going to be a waitress for the rest of your life. So what do you think? Like, my unconscious said, okay, I'm going to be a waitress for the rest of my life. And it stayed there. So I
Yeah.
did some group therapy about learning how to take care of your little child in you, little Fabienne, little Pat, detach from the core beliefs that your parent had told you or from what you believed, and just like learn to take care of that little person, little child in you. And then that's how slowly I built myself, going back to school, and that's how it's by the little actions that I slowly decided to do, and not being that victim person anymore. It happened to me. Whatever happened to you happened. We can't change that. The only thing we can change is, how do we decide to live from now? How do you want your life to be? You want to be miserable for the rest of your life because sexual abuse happened to you, because you were abused in somehow, or because you had an accident? It's a choice. For so many people, they're way much more into problematics, right? But at the end of the day, there's always little things that you can do to make your life better. And it's all about your mindset.
Now, when you were 20, you described this scene at the bar where you were kind of distancing yourself, like kind of getting a new perspective on what you were in and how you didn't want to be in it anymore. That's really interesting because I relate to that in terms of, for me, that was like a detachment of seeing my everyday actions and seeing how far apart they were from what I actually wanted out of my life, and seeing that I was behaving in ways that I'm like, this isn't me. Like, I kind of like lying to myself. My values, my integrity, like, it was, I wasn't living from a place of integrity. And it was not necessarily one moment where I noticed that, but usually I would notice it the most when my head was on the pillow the morning after doing something the night before, that I was like, why did I do that? I did it again. Feel the crap. I don't want to do this anymore. This life isn't serving me anymore. So I totally, like, I relate to that moment. Did you know when you wanted to make that change, what that change was going to look like? Or did you just know that you wanted to make a change, that this wasn't serving you anymore?
I knew I was going to I wanted to work with
How'd you
youth,
know
like
that?
young offenders. It was just inside. It was in me. I think it may sound a little bit weird, but it was a calling for me. It was like, okay, I'm going back to school and I'm going to work with young offenders. And that's exactly my path, what happened. I was always drawn to people, younger youth that are suffering, for maybe because I could see myself a little bit in them, although I wasn't necessarily like an angry person. I was angry about things that happened to me. So I could relate, and like relating to trust. These young offenders, they don't trust you. So I could relate to that. And I was like, maybe in my in my mind, I was hoping I could maybe give them that little sense of hope that you can trust someone with what happened, and being able to communicate your needs and what you'd like.
How long did you know that that's what you wanted to do? Was it something that you had thought about long before, or how did you come to that realization?
I think it was always in the back of my mind. I've always wanted to either go in psychology, social work, or anything to help, to save. And then that's what brought me to where I am now.
A lot of people will have things in the back of their mind, plans, things they'd like to do, people, things they'd like to become, steps they'd like to take, but change is hard and they end up staying in that bar for longer, even though it feels like they want to make a change. What was it in your case that day that gave you courage, that gave you the appetite to confront change and to take that harder path?
I love your question. I think what comes up when you're asking me the question is I was done with pretending and done with the suffering. So what I mean by that is, and I don't want to make people upset, but when you are in the bar scene and the clubs and all that, it's a facade. It's a mask we put on. We want to enjoy. And oftentimes I've seen so many, it's like in movies, I've seen so many things where, they flash their money, their dumb bling bling, everything. But at the end of the day, these people are not necessarily happy. It's just like a coping mechanism. So for me, it was like, okay, I hate my life. My life sucks. I don't know what I want to do in life. I'm a lost soul. So I'm just going to go in the bar scene. And I had all the attention needed, so it made me feel good because I didn't have the attention and then, but at some point you realize like, it's not for me anymore. Good for other people if they're happy, like no judgment there. But for me, I knew that it was time for me to do something else. And I've always loved to have the connection with people. So I wanted to have this therapeutic communication, a connection with young offenders.
That makes sense because you also chose a path that wasn't necessarily going to bring you riches and fame and, fortune. And maybe because you had been in that scene and you had seen people walking around and flaunting that it wasn't the be all end all, and that to aim at that or to aspire to be in that life, you knew better than that at that point in your life. That I guess you wanted something real. The word that comes to mind as I hear you talk is you wanted something real.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm still like that. I would definitely take on a nice bottle of champagne watching the sunset over going in a high-end restaurant or having, something that's more extravagant. For me, I crave connection. I crave true conversation that are meaningful. It feeds my soul and it makes me feel like that's my purpose.
That transition toward that new career and leaving that life behind. In my case, I had entrenched habits. I was in my 30s. That was the life I knew. So change happened very gradually, slowly. Sometimes I wanted it to go a certain way and I'd fall backwards into old habits. What did that look like for you, that journey?
So went back to school and I was still working on weekends when I started working for women in a shelter, women's shelter. And then I was working nights. So then I quit the scene, the bar scene and the restaurants. I At times during this life, I went back maybe, I remember maybe 4 years ago, I went back 4 or 5 years ago to work in a high-end restaurant, Italian restaurant. And I still like the connection and I love to serve people with the nice food. And I went back because I had no choice, financially. Sometimes it's not always easy when you work in the field where I am in the social work and, therapy, psychotherapist, we don't make the salaries that, it'd be nice. Sometimes it's hard to understand when you're like, wow, like we save lives from suicide at times, but still the money is not rewarded for the work that when you work with humans. I find there's a big gap from office work. Not that it's not everyone to each, they have their own personal, not personal, but they have their own professional work. But I feel that it should be a little bit more rewarded when it comes to working with humans who are suffering and need the help.
Yeah, I completely agree. So from the time you finished your education to your working with, what did that look like working with youth? What were you doing?
So after the women's shelter, I started working for people for adolescent with conduct disorder in the residence. That was rough too. Back in the day, we used to do physical restraints. So it was very hard for me because it would make me feel like some type like of abuse towards a children, towards youth, because it's physically you have no choice. But when they were in crisis, at some point you had to maintain and restrain them. And then after that, I went to work with youth for I've done a lot youth justice for I don't even know what the word is missing now. Justice réparatrice.
Restorative?
Restorative justice. Yes, yes. So I worked in 11 school in Ontario for first offense or for an offense that they would do, and we would do some restorative forms with the victims and their families. And then I worked with youth who were on the streets, having to give them the crack pipes, and that was another experience, and giving them their social service check from every month. So having to check on them if they were where they were living, what they were doing, if they had like a place to stay, if they had food, and the support they needed. So yeah, it was that was also rough. And then I went to work at the detention center. So for I've been around in this scene for with the 25 years, I think now.
And at the detention center, was it youth?
Yeah, youth detention center in Ottawa, and I was the anger management counselor there. So it was coming from either the court, from the judge saying, depending on the offense and the charges, let's say it was anything that was related to violence, they would send the youth to me. So I was working within the facility, closed facility, but I was also working in the community. So let's say they would do their sentence and then they would be out, and there was sometimes like meeting them in the community to see how they were doing and helping, and also coming from probation officers.
And you would describe it like primarily by psychotherapy work? Is that how you would describe it?
For the anger management, it was more of a program, so psychoed. But I also built it in a way where I would do some type of therapy, but then I wasn't really supposed to because that wasn't the mandate. The mandate from the ministry was you have to do 6 8 session of a program, and then you get a certificate. And then it's like check, check, check. It's done. You send it back to the probation officer, and the probation officer puts that in the file. So then when the youth, not the kid, but the young offender goes back, if he goes back to court, then they're like, okay, well, you've done this, and then what's next? So, but for me, at some point, it was like I grew into my career professionally. I've done so much training that I was somewhere else and I wanted to do more therapy work with the youths, and that wasn't the mandate of my position back in the day. So then I left 2 years ago, and I'm a subcontractor for an agency that works with people who have had vehicle accident, and have acquired brain injuries and trauma that comes with the injury of the brain.
Of all ages.
Of all ages. I think the youngest was 14, and I have an 80-year-old lady.
Oh, wow. So you have a breadth of experience that spanned well, a good chunk of it with youth, young offenders, and now you do work with a broad range. And I'm wondering, through all that rich experience that you have, what would be some like key takeaways, some key things that have stuck with you that have really helped the population of people that you've worked with in your career?
So the first thing is try to accept the reality. So there's a part where you need to grieve, depending on whatever situation you're in, whatever you have been through, there's a grieving part. That grieving part also needs you to be gentle to yourself. What does that mean? That means self care. When I talk about self care, people are like, okay, I self care. I take a shower, I take a long bath, I go for walks. No, self care is much deeper than that. So,
Okay.
what can it look like? It looks like, being able to get up in the morning and do your gratitude. And sometimes I get, but what is gratitude? How do you do that? How do you do that? You wake up. Some people like to have a glass of water with lemon. Some people like to have a coffee. Take that time for yourself. Don't be in a rush to go to work. Don't be in a rush. Get up a little bit earlier. Take that time to sit with yourself. Breathe. Taking little breath, deep breath. We teach that all the time. And often people that are not used to that think that it's a little bit weird, or yeah, it may sound weird, but it's proven statistically that it works. A lot of people don't even know where their breathing stops. Just for fun, like right now, is it down your belly, or is it here? Or is it here? So it's learning to, okay, that's why we say take a deep breath, because the air needs to go in order to regulate your nervous system. Because oftentimes when we go through trauma, when we've been through trauma, we're always either flight, fight, fawn mode. We don't know. Always like that hypervigilance, right? So it's really learning about these, like, we call it the window of tolerance. The more aware you are of your body and your mind, then you can regulate yourself, right? So if you know that your throat is tight because you're stressed, and your chest, the air doesn't go through, it's because you're stressed. So it's like, okay, I'll take a deep breath, take a little moment, like, so I was saying, learning how to regulate yourself by deep breathing is important. In the morning, what are your intentions of the day, right? Do you want to be angry the whole day because this happened to you? Or you want to choose to, okay, like, maybe what can I do? What are the solutions? It's trying to find solution to your problems in order to take those solutions and take little actions, right? When I talk about gratitude, it's just thank you for this beautiful conversation we have together today, in hopes that maybe one person will listen to us today and say, wow, I'm going to try that tomorrow. Maybe it's going to help me. Being grateful are the little things. Being grateful for this beautiful sunshine outside, being grateful for, I don't know, some people may have great families. Be grateful for that. Being grateful for the interaction you have with your friends. It's the little things. Some people think that life is grandiose and that's what makes them happy. Just the little thing is, the more you have gratitude for what you have now, the more abundance is going to come to us. It's all about the way you feel. So if you feel good, you're going to bring good to you. If you feel, can I say shitty?
You can swear. Yeah.
If you feel shitty, well, chances are that life's going to be shitty, right? So I always teach self-care is my first. I always do a self-care assessment with my clients. And we go from physical, emotional, professional, spiritual self-care, and see what is it that you're doing well, and what is it that you could do to make things a little bit better or work on. And then from there, we start with that. So that helps me do my treatment, my plan, my treatment care plan, and teach them. Sometimes they just don't know. Some people don't know how to take that time for themselves, and gratitude. So these are the things I would always prone is gratitude, self-care, and then the rest comes little actions.
What would you say on the gratitude side? I'm completely with you, by the way. I feel like when I'm living in gratitude, how can I put, maybe the other way, when I'm not living in gratitude, uh, that's when it's like jealousy. I have feelings of jealousy. I have feelings of why can't I have that? Or I have feelings of inferiority because I see others advancing in ways that I'm not. And so, and I think social media, I think the fact that we're also connected, and even people that are living in another strata, another world, that I get so connected to seeing these people in that lifestyle that they live, that it's easy to get to fall prey to that way of thinking. And so I may have moments of lapses of gratitude, but when I'm living in gratitude, for me, it could be journaling. It could be just while my head's on the pillow thinking of three things I'm grateful for. Then it really does set my day off on a different path, and
Absolutely.
also helps me to go along with this idea of it's my path. It's nobody else. My path is unique, and maybe it won't have all those zeros in the bank account, or maybe it won't have that fame of all those followers on Instagram, but it's mine. I'm not living someone else's dream or the dream that society tells me to live. So I think gratitude is in that too. I've come across people, Fab, that they've suffered a lot of setbacks and suffered things that sometimes it's not even a fault of no fault of their own, so they get into this mentality of, oh, it always happens to me. This shit always happens to me. Why me? How do you help people? I don't know if you've had youth or you've had patients that have been in that. Like, how do you help someone snap out of that?
It's a great question, Pat, because when I think about some of my clients who've been through so much car accident where, you miss a leg, you miss an arm, or your brain has been, you know, hit and you're not the same person anymore. Your focus, your concentration, your memory loss, you get angry, you lash out and it's not you. I can understand how for them they don't understand why it happened to them. I can relate to that. But at the same time, as a therapist, my job is to give them a lot of compassion, but also help them grieve from who they were before, right? And accept where they're at today. And I'm no doctor, I'm no expert, and I know it's a long path for them to grieve that and to accept it. So they go through a lot of roller coaster and motion. And again, there's no right or wrong recipe. There's a recipe for for each individual. But as long as you try to have this routine or do those little action that gives you that feeling of feeling content, it's what's going to help. So by having the gratitude, like you say, you feel that feeling of like, okay, it feels good. Well, that's what you need to continue and try to find those little moments, that's going to help you feel some type of content. But everybody has their own stories. So it's hard to say what's going to work for one necessarily, but I know for sure that the more your mindset is set into the positive, the more you will be able to pursue your life with some type of recovery, rehabilitation.
And what are some steps to grief? Like, if someone needs to go through that, what does that typically look like?
It's a good question. I would say, back in the day, we would say that there were 7 steps to grief, but actually, it's just a roller coaster. It's just everyone's gonna go through anger, denial, and then eventually you're into survival mode because you still have a life and you still need to take care of the kids, for example, or you still need to go to work or whatever it is. But it's just like, how can I say? Each day, each step is to take a little bit forward. I always think that if people are able to journal when they're grieving, it's part of the journey. It helps. Writing about it, being able to share with someone that you trust is going to help also accept what happened to you and where you're at. Sometimes you have to take some time off. By that, I mean you have to be in to your solitude, be in solitude with yourself. And sometimes you have to reach out to people and tell them that what you're going through is hard, someone that you trust. So if you have at least one person that you can trust, that you can share what's happening to you, is one thing. Journaling is a second thing. I'm always going to say, go for walks, go exercise, work out, and some reading about grief, reading about personal growth, podcasts. There's many things that people can do. It's just a matter of trying things and say, okay, this is for me, this is not for me. For some people, I always say that to the young offenders, we talk about meditation, mindfulness, breath work, and some of them are like, yo, what's that? And I'm like, I don't blame you because, I'm a little bit like you guys. So I always give them the example. For me, it was boxing. So I was going to the club, the boxing club, to box and to do the training, because that for me was releasing all the stress, the negativity, the nervousness that I had. And I was an angry person, even though I don't look like I was angry, and I'm a woman, and we don't we don't express it the same way as men, but it was all inside. So for me, that was working instead of going to a yoga class and doing Pilates. So some of the guys, if for them it's to go and take it, run like crazy, then run like crazy. It's okay. It helps.
Well, oftentimes if I'm in a mood, because I can get moody, I feel like if I practice self-care, just one thing, if I go for a run or if I sit on the meditation mat for half an hour, usually I'll snap out of it. Sometimes I won't. Sometimes it'll take a couple days, and that's really frustrating because I feel like I'm doing everything right and nothing's helping. I feel kind of powerless in that situation.
That's when you need to say to yourself, Pat, it's okay that I'm not okay today. Because we always want to be as perfect as possible. But sometimes, it is what it is. We're not feeling it. We're not doing well. And it's accepting that and being able to say it first. And then, it's easier to say, okay, today is a shitty day. I'm not feeling good at all. Tomorrow's going to be another day. But if you see that you go down the hill and you're not coming back up, then you need to go talk to a professional for sure.
Anger. That's something we haven't talked about much on the podcast. And it sounds like you've done some real work in this area. We've talked a lot about maybe some of these things we've already talked about helps with anger, but is there anything else with emotional regulation, anger? In my case, I would say my anger tends to look like irritability. I get very irritable. How do you typically help people with those?
I love your question. So always remind yourselves that anger is an emotion, just like being happy, right? But when we're angry, we call it a secondary emotion, because it's like we say, it's the tip of the iceberg. Because underneath being angry, there can be some remorse, there can be some guilt, there can be some fear, some anxiety. There's so many things that's under a negative energy. It's much, much easier. And I always tell that to the youths, the guys at the detention. It's much, much easier to lash out at someone and tell them to go themselves or punch them in the face or punch a wall than to say, listen, what you just said to me was quite hurtful, and I can't, I'm not doing okay with that. Or it's much easier to do all these violence behavior than to say, I've had a shitty life. My mom wasn't there for me, and I'm so pissed at her and so hurt. Guys don't want to say that, right? So when you're angry, it's to try to be truthful to yourself and look at inside of you. Why am I angry? Okay. Why is it pissing me off? Why is this person triggering me? Because the person is triggering you. The person's not doing it on purpose. It's you that's triggered. It doesn't belong to them, it belongs to you. So if you want to do the work, then look at yourself inside. Okay, that person, and sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you need a therapist to help you figure it out. Sometimes it reminds you of your father being who the father he was. Sometimes it can be a teacher that was like being a bully, So being angry is just, it depends on each people, but it comes from what you've learned, what you've experienced, right? So learning how to regulate your anger is first being aware of your behavior. And then it's like, okay, how can I do better next time? What can I change next time? And then when that next time comes, it's like, okay, I get it. You're impulsive because, when people get angry, often it can be very, very quick, but there's always signs before you're going to lose your shit. Always a sign. Learn to retreat yourself. Take a step back or go for a walk, go to the gym, listen to music, start writing. There's many, many things, and learn to, again, when you're able to take a step back, regulate yourself to bring you back to a state where you're riding the wave, you'll feel much better. But it's a process. Because if you've always been angry your whole life, and I always tell that to the guys, you're 15, 18, 19, 20 years old, you've been angry your whole life. I always ask, when was the first incident that you remember? Most often it was before school. So I always say, it's taking you 15 years, 20 years to be angry all the time. It's not going to be a week now that you'll be okay. It's going to be a process. It's going to take time, and I always remember with the youths, their brain is not yet developed, until they're 25, 26. So give yourself some and also give yourself some tap on the back and love in order to, because if you don't give yourself the love, nobody else is going to give it to you. But when you're young, it's hard to understand that. How do you give yourself love? By learning to love yourself, right?
That's so important because I feel like today youth will grow up, or a lot of people may grow up without ever hearing words of encouragement. And I think people are starved for that, to get that tap on the back. And if it's external validation, I suppose, from someone that you care deeply about, like a parent or a teacher or something. And when you don't get that like this, then self-love is difficult to practice.
It's very hard, very hard. And it's a process that you need to learn about who you are. What do you love? Right? So by doing little action, I keep saying, do little action every day. Get out of your comfort zone. You like to play soccer? Well, try something else, go play tennis instead and try if you like it, or go to the movie by yourself, sit down at a restaurant, go eat a meal with yourself, enjoy yourself. If you cannot enjoy a meal with yourself by yourself, then you don't love yourself. I always ask, another thing that I'm going to suggest to your audience,
Please.
write down 50 things, 50 strengths about you. 50. If you can, write 100 and read them out loud, because that's who you are. Don't focus on, I don't have a degree and whatever. Don't focus on, oh, my parents always wanted me to be. Who cares? You have your own life, and you have to cherish that. Not everyone has the opportunity to be here today. Not everyone. So again, what do you choose? To be happy? If you want to be happy, then make yourself happy. Nobody else is going to do it for you, regardless of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me, last year I got laid off from my job. I started working with a career coach, and the first step with this career coach that she does with all of her patients is strength exercise. She says, my people I work with, they forget all the amazing things that they've done up until this point. You get laid off or you're going through a transition, and all of a sudden you might feel worthless. You might feel like like you've been discarded, and so she spends the time really mapping out and recalling all those amazing things that you did. So your exercise reminded me of that exercise I did with her.
We didn't talk much about resilience, but one thing that I think it's important for people to understand and know and practice is that resilience is not just like getting hit and getting back up, but it's like a long, slow, gentle, and forward way to be resilient, because it's a lifeline thing. And if you build your resilience, you will heal much faster than if you don't.
What are steps that you can take to build your resilience every single day?
I think it's taking ownership of your life. And I think it would be self leadership. And one thing I still work on is discipline.
How do you work on discipline? 'Cause for some people, that's a dirty word. They don't like discipline. They put it with negative stuff.
So another thing that I teach or I share with my clients or with the youth or when I'm in class is I love, what's her name? She teaches about the 5 second rule. Just has a book called Let Them. Anyway, her name
I don't
doesn't
know it.
come. People will know blonde lady. Anyways,
Oh,
super cool.
Mel Robbins?
Mel Robbins, thank you very much. She shared the 5 second rules. I've learned this couple years ago. And I share that with the youths in detention, and I share that with my clients today who are struggling. They're struggling with depression, struggling with anxiety, struggling with routine, struggling with life in general from trauma, from emotion regulation. And I always say 5 second rule. You wake up at a certain time, you have your alarm, you get up, you eyes open. You go, oh, fuck, not another day. Or you go, today's going to be a great day. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, get up. Oh, fuck, I have to do my bed. No, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I make my bed. I gotta go to the gym. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 doesn't even give you the time to think. You just do it. It's not even a question. That's discipline itself. So if you're able to do that, imagine the world belongs to you. Because you never question yourself. You're like, no, I'm doing it. This is it. So 5 second rule.
I didn't know
I didn't
that.
make
I
it.
never heard that. That's okay.
I
We'll give her credit in the
yes.
episode description, or you can
Yeah.
own it. We could give it to you too if you
No,
prefer.
no, it's not mine. But I love it. And I remember some of the guys still telling me, I think about you when the 5 second rule. I'm like, great. Because that's how you're gonna be able to build your discipline. Because it's not the motivation. Who has the motivation necessarily for things that you don't really want to do? No one. Isn't when people say I don't have the motivation to, I feel you. How about you try discipline?
What comes to mind for me when you talk about this is that it's kind of like the easy route versus the harder route. It's kind of like, and the easy route is it's going to give me short-term pleasure. I may get a few seconds. It's like if I go and open the fridge and eat something unhealthy, instead of getting my butt off the couch and going to watch and going to the gym, or choosing to click on the next episode on Netflix when I know I was going to go and sit on the mat and do meditation or do something that in the long term I know is going to make me feel more going to make me just feel better. And so I think it's like that short term versus that long term. And so that 5 second rule, I know once I get to the gym, I'm going to feel great and be like, I'm glad you went, Pat. But it's just that those seconds of getting my butt off the couch, that's really, really hard sometimes.
I'm there. I still struggle. I come back from work, I'm done work, and I'm exhausted because I listen all day and I try to suggest things. So oftentimes I just need to be in my own little world. I don't want to talk to no one. But sometimes, like I push myself to go see a friend or to do something with my little sister or to spend time with my daughter and her husband, or it's just like the little things to push yourself into getting out of the zone of not feeling the greatest. It doesn't come like that, right? It's just, it doesn't change in a day. It changes the day. Life is going to change the day that you decide that you deserve more.
And how does that come about? Does that come about from building self-esteem? Like, what is it that makes one feel like they deserve more?
You just said it. It's knowing your worth, knowing that you deserve respect, knowing that you deserve to be happy. But slowly, by doing one little thing a day with self care, with gratitude, doing exercises like the 50 or 100 strength of yourself and reading them out loud and believing it is going to help you build yourself and love yourself.
I want to come back to the victimhood, the victim mentality, the victim state you brought up earlier, because I think it's important. I want to, for listeners, like, how would you describe victim state, to be in that state versus not being in that state? Like, how would you How would someone know who's listening saying, well, maybe I'm in victim state? Like, what does that look like versus someone who's not?
Complaining,
Okay.
complaining all the time.
Okay.
You know, you kind of said it earlier on. Why me? Why don't I have this? Why is, comparing yourself, being envious of others, being moody all the time, like, or having coping mechanism that are unhealthy when you're going through some tough times. You're gonna relate to going to, I don't know, alcohol, or not that it's wrong, but being excessive, or addiction. That you're unhappy, and people can see it by the actions that, or the behavior that you have, as opposed to, look at me back in the day, you know being somehow fake, portraying that I was all that and a bag of chips. Deep down, I was a lost soul, didn't know what I was going to do in life. I was probably depressed, and so many, feelings of not being happy. And people would thought that I may have been happy, but people that knew me knew I wasn't. And
Yeah.
as opposed to, and it's the same thing, like being in relationship that are not meaningful, just to be in a relationship, being codependent, and then eventually the switch is like, well, look at me now. I think I have a good career. I think that I support people. I feel in my heart that I think I'm at the right place, being able to be by yourself. Some people are never been able to be without a partner. That's because maybe somewhere you're not happy with yourself. You can't fulfill your own needs. So the more you grow into the person you want to be, you can also see it as, when you were a child, become the person that you would have needed when you were a kid.
Oh, I like that. It also makes me think of the word aiming up, like aim at something, aim to be better every single day. Even if you don't get to what you're aiming at least you're going in that direction. When I was in party mode, when I was in going out mode, when I was in serial dating mode, I wasn't aiming at anything. I was just aiming at pleasure. I was aiming at fun. And it was like I was biding my time. It was just time was marching on and it was just the same old. And the more pleasure it's like a bottomless pit. It's like you can just keep chasing pleasure. And so I think of aiming up. Once I started aiming at an ideal and trying to move in that direction, that's when steps to becoming better changes started to materialize.
True. And it also, something that's important to remind ourselves is, like, it doesn't mean because you want to be happy, you're aiming for this, that you're not going to get into bumpy roads. Like, there's always going to be ups and downs in life, but it's to learn. And I always say that, learn to ride the wave. Life is like a wave, goes like this, and learn to ride with it. When it gets too bumpy, then that's when you need to take a step back and, self-care, or you use strategies that works for you, from meditation to writing, or doing what makes you feel good.
I also think of your friend Brenda. You said that Brenda was the friend who said, "Hey, you're a bit heavy,"
It was like 20 years ago.
But what stuck with me is I used to be hungry for that type of friendship. So a friend who will actually call you out and say, "Hey, you may not," call out your blind spots, the things that you don't realize about yourself that might hurt your feelings. To have a friend who's willing to call it out and not know what's going to happen after, like, that is really rare. And I had a group of friends. We used to go out. It'd take a few drinks to kind of lubricate the situation. But what we would do is we'd sit around the table, and we used to call it Oath. And it was basically this idea of having a table of honesty where we'd go around and kind of call each other out on our shit. It didn't always go the way it was meant to go, and probably wasn't the healthiest thing because there was alcohol involved. But in some ways we got to get called out on blind spots we didn't know were there. So,
And be real with one another.
and be real with one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, till this day, I'm still friends with her. She's a lovely human being who has a share of her life that wasn't easy and did a lot of therapy and growth, and she's just a wonderful human. So, yeah, being surrounded by people that have energy that brings the best out of you, that's richness itself.
Tell me a little bit about that.
I would say that the friends that I have, which I can count on my hand, we've been friends for a long time. And people that have that in their life, it's like a little treasures, because when you're able to have those relationships with people that can, like, again, talk about the true, that's who you are, and confront you with shit that hurts and you don't really want to hear, are your true friends. But these friends also help you become the best version of yourself, because if they weren't there, you wouldn't be growing up and you wouldn't be confronted with your truth, because you wouldn't want to see it, right? Or you don't see it. And when they confront you with it, then you're like, okay, now I know. I know that I have that behavior. Or now I know that I've done this. What can I do to change? You can't say you didn't know. So if you want to grow and continue to love yourself and aim for whatever you want, then.
And they say true friendship is also when a friend is genuinely happy for you when things are going well.
Yeah. It's not easy to find true friendship. It takes trust and it takes being able to be vulnerable. Same thing as a relationship, a loving, like a partner, a life partner. If you don't have trust and you can't be vulnerable with them, you'll never have nothing.
And I find I'm most connected with my partner when I'm vulnerable and actually saying something that I feel like is a negative of me or makes me like shows a weaker side of me. That's actually when that builds the connection with my partner.
Of course. Yeah. If you're true to yourself, then you're being vulnerable towards your partner. And then it opens up this connection that's going to tighten your relationship even more. I agree.
I like to bring the interviews to a close with this question, Fab. Growing up means something different to every person. Everyone has their growing up story. You've shared a piece of yours today. What does growing up mean to you?
Growing up means being truthful to yourself. Growing up is accepting things that you can change. Growing up is taking accountability for yourself. Growing up is being able to connect with yourself. And growing up means to push for your dreams and go get them.
Well, thank you for taking the time to have this conversation. I'm very grateful for the conversation. I really enjoyed it. I think there was a lot of rich things that listeners will take away that I did, and some topics that we haven't covered before. So thank you for sharing your rich experience with us. And I hope to speak with you again.
Namaste.
Namaste. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of After Peter Pan. If it resonated with you, I'd love if you could leave us a like, drop us a rating. It really helps to drive new audiences to the show. Thanks again, and until next time.